Hello and welcome back to the next installment of the Red Jeep project. Right now, which I gave you a little bit of preview of last time, is the start of my onboard air system setup. This is the air tool oiler, which will be used to oil the AC compressor. And this is the air filter that I use. It's just a crankcase filter made by K&N, nothing special. All I've done is put one of my barb fittings into here, which will then just get cinched down with this hose clamp to make sure you get a nice seal on there. And then this just, of course, threads into there like so. And then this is the bracket that I made. I had some scrap sheet metal lying around, so I just cut it up and bent it into the shape that I wanted. This fits onto here just like that, and then I have two screws that then go into those holes that'll hold the air tool oiler just like this inside of the Jeep. And then these bolts I cut down will then be used to hold it onto a bracket that I found on the that used to hold the accumulator tank on, actually, for the AC setup. And it'll get held on just like that. Now I'll bring you around into the Jeep, get you a better look at what it looks like in there. So I'm just about to show you real quick what the bracket and air tube oiler will look like inside of the Jeep. That bracket, just a bracket left behind when I removed the accumulator tank. And here it all is, held in with my hand, what it'll look like. I just have to go ahead and get an air line from my air tool oiler over to the intake side of the now air compressor. Alright, so here is the distribution block set up with all of the attachments I'm going to have coming off of it. Now I was originally planning on fitting it in between here somehow, but there's just no way I can make it all work. So I had to look at other options. Now luckily, being that I removed the accumulator tank, it'll fit down in here, sort of. Kind of at an angle like that, but that means I have to create a rather interesting bracket setup so it stays there and is solid, because this has a little bit of heft to it. So there's the oiler and whatnot right there, but we'll see what I come up with. Alright, so when we last spoke, I was going to try and make a bracket to fit the block over here. I've changed my mind and actually made a bracket so it fits this way. I think it makes more sense this way. This is the bracket that I've made. It fits across from there all the way over to here, and then I had to make another little part of a bracket over here like that, so that sits there like this, and then the rest of the bracket can come over and fit in like this, and then the distribution block itself will sit into those holes right there. Let's test fit it, make sure the bracket will hold everything and whatnot. And nothing's in the way. So this is the approximate final location and setup of what the distribution block will look like. There isn't really anything in the way. I'll just have to zip tie my vacuum line that goes to the vacuum canister down to something down below, and I may have to find a way to keep those wires from interfering with the check valve area, because there will be an air line that has to run through there. So, next up is setting up that distribution block in a more permanent manner. Alright, so now that I know that the bracket will fit and it will hold my setup, if you're wondering, the bracket is made out of 16th inch thick sheet metal. It's pretty thick. That's what most of the other brackets under the hood are made out of, so it should hold up fine. But what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up feeding my bolts through this way, So it'll be the head of this little bolt, my bracket, and then I'll put a nut plus a couple washers to space it, because the top of this coalescing filter is a little bit wider than this distribution block, so I have to have a little bit of spacer there. And that'll be tightened down to the bracket, and then I'll just have to use some of my nylon walking nuts on the other side to hold that in place. Now, since I know that's all going to work, I'm going to put this together more permanently with all of my fittings and whatnot that I'm going to need to make it work. So what I'm going to end up doing is taking all this apart, taking this one apart, and using Teflon tape around all of the threads, and then tightening it decently well, not enough to break the Teflon tape, but enough to snug it all nicely. Snug plus, we'll call it. So that way I don't get any leaks in my system. So, I'll put that together, check back in a minute. Alright, so here's what I've done now. I ended up taking this bracket part of the way off so I could mount my SPA hardware to hang the distribution block off a little bit better. These are just small bolts with flathead heads on them, so I just fed them through that way, put a bolt on this side with some thread locker, and tightened them down nice and tight so they shouldn't move, and kind of turn them into studs. So all I'm going to do now is hang my distribution block off there and tighten that down with my nylon walking nuts. Although of course I'll have to add a few more washers to this to give it a little bit more space to get around that coalescing filter, but we'll see you then. Alright, so now on to the next step, which is taking this input-output setup and converting it over to a normal 3/8 NPT fitting. What I'm going to do is just use normal compression fittings or normal brass compressor fittings to just convert that over. The input side, meaning the side where you're going to suck air from, is going to be the 5/8 outer diameter side. The smaller 1/2 inch one will be the output or the high pressure side. The only modification I had to make to this was I had to drill out this a little bit to fit the compression fitting inside of there, like so. The 5/8 one fits no problem. Just like that. So I'm going to get this mounted up in the vise, and then we'll get the compression fittings on. Alright, so I have the this part of the compression fitter, the bigger side of it, on my 5/8 intake side. And let's just squish that down a little bit like that. Then the compression ring goes in next, and then this part goes in next. I'm not sure what you call this half, but so basically what's going to happen is the compression ring is going to get squished onto the line and create a seal. If you've ever done any plumbing work, it's the same concept. Snug it up nice and tight like that. So after you have the compression ring compressed onto the line, you can then put some Teflon tape on there to make sure to give it some extra protection from leaking, and then you just stick everything back together one more time and you're good to go. If you're wondering, I had to drill this out to a 3/8 inch with a 3/8 inch drill bit just to make it so that the this part can go into the line. But this process is going to be the same. Alright, so I have my compression fittings on there, and I have the intake block remounted back on my AC compressor, or now air compressor rather. So one thing I do need to do is cut tube to plumb it up. Now this is just a 3/8 inch air tube, nothing special. And what's going to happen is it's going to get pushed on all these different barb fittings to go in between, you know, the pieces where it needs to be plumbed with airline. So what you do is you would push on this line over all the barbs, which make it pretty much impossible without cutting it to get back off, and then to give yourself some extra tightness and protection from leaks, you clamp down a hose clamp on it. So that's what I'm going to do between here and then from there over to here, and then from there I'll run the line all the way to the back of the Jeep, and the one facing forwards will be for my quick connect that's going to be in the front of the vehicle somewhere. So we'll see you then. Unfortunately, one thing I forgot to do or didn't think about was the fact that I'm going to need a female barb fitting or some sort of 3/8 to 3/8 coupler, because I have male barb fittings, not female ones, and those compression fittings require some sort of female connector. So I'll have to run out and get some of those. Not a big deal though. So here is the front, mostly all plumbed together. I have my air line running from the air tube oiler over to the intake side. Then I have the output side, or the high pressure side, that then runs through the check valve, through the distribution block. The only thing up front I need to do is make a line that goes from that barb fitting you just saw all the way down to the front of the Jeep somewhere, which will then have, you know, just a normal IM quick connect for, you know, air lines, a blower, or air tools, whatever. The long air line from the front of the Jeep all the way to the back of the Jeep, which will go to a 5-gallon tank that I've shown you before, runs along the inside of the unibody frame rail where the fuel lines and the brake lines are. They go all the way to the back of the Jeep. Then it goes up through the floor, which you'll see in a second. That hole it passes through there is actually where the gas tank line is. And then up here I'll have to make a mount for the tank and then do all the connectors back here. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, subscribe, and if you're wondering, this is the continuation of the Dana 44 XJ build. This is, you know, the continuation of the rest of the build. I forgot to mention it last video, but this is the next phase of that Jeep. Stay tuned.